Welcome back to that episode of Smooth Brain EDH. We're going to make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. We are super excited to have Ian from ComedianMTG on our channel for some janky casual gameplay.
Hey everyone, it's me Ian here from ComedianMTG. You can usually find me playing competitive EDH and talking about that and the format on my YouTube channel over at ComedianMTG on YouTube. And do things like breaking down top 16s of major tournaments, going over EDH meta decks like Winota and stuff like that, but also brewing new stuff. And if you want to check out the channel that the EDH Winota deck was brewed on, or Don Wicker Thrasios, or Tivit, or a bunch of other decks that people know and love nowadays, you should come check it out. youtube.com/ComedianMTG.
Our first player today is Ian on Estrid the Masked. This is a Bant deck focused around Morph creatures, using Estrid to untap enchanted lands in order to activate abilities on opponents' turns with the mana. He keeps a hand with Blossoming Sands, Tranquil Cove, Seaside Citadel, Trail of Mystery, Dawn's Reflection, Master of Pearls, and Voidmage Apprentice. Up next is Jason on Ramos, Dragon Engine. This 5-color deck is called Oops All One cards, and it's just full of cards that either win the game or cause players to lose the game. He starts the game with a Hallowed Fountain, Temple Garden, Seagate, Darksteel Reactor, Hidetsugu Consumes All, Cyclonic Rift, and Biovisionary. Third is Ethan on the partner pairing of Rograk, Son of Rogal, and the Prismatic Piper. This is a mono green deck, hoping to load up the adorable kobold with +1 counters, equipment, and enchantments to beat opponents' faces. His opening hand is 2 Forests, Tranquil Thicket, Hardened Scales, Snake Umbra, Visions of Dominance, and Hunter's Prowess. Last up is Brent on Alora, Merry Thief, with the Agent of the Shadow Thieves background. This Demir deck is all about unblockable attacks and ninjas, using ninjutsu abilities to sidestep Alora's bouncing downside. He keeps an island, a swamp, Path of Ancestry, Myriad Landscape, Bident of Thassa, Fairy Seer, and Throat Slitter. We're about to hop right into the game, but before that, go ahead and give us a like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. We post new gameplay videos every week, so you won't want to miss it. Big shout out to our patrons. We really appreciate the support. Link to our Patreon is in the description, as well as the links to our deck lists, our social media, our podcast channel, and our public Discord server. Our channel is also partnered with Dragon Shield, so if you'd like to pick up any new sleeves or Magic-related products, check out the affiliate link in the description. We're also partnered with Inks Gaming, so if you're looking to make any custom playmats, use our affiliate link also in the description. Now, on to the gameplay.
It looks like Brent wins the die roll, and he starts off with Island into Fairy Seer, and he'll scry 2 and leave them at the top. Ian plays Seaside Citadel and passes to Jason, who plays a Boros Guildgate and passes to Ethan. Ethan starts off by casting Rograk, then he'll play a Forest, cast Hardened Scales, and then pass back to Brent, who will play a Swamp, and then he'll move to combat and swing for 1 at Ethan, who will take the 1 damage, and then Brent passes the turn to Ian, who will play Tranquil Cove, gaining a life, and then he passes to Jason, who will play Seagate, aiming black. He'll then pass to Ethan, who starts off by cycling Tranquil Thicket. Then he'll play a Forest, swing at Jason for a hug, and then he'll pass to Brent. Brent plays Myriad Landscape, and then will cast Changeling Outcast, then pass the turn. Ian will play Blossoming Sands, gaining another life, and then he'll cast Trail of Mysteries, and then pass the turn to Jason. And Jason will shock into Temple Garden, then cast a very nice Hidetsugu Consumes All. This destroys all non-land permanents with CMC 1 or less. It resolves, and in response to the trigger, Ethan will Nature's Claim it, but that doesn't stop everything else from being blown up. The turn is then passed, and Ethan will start off by playing a Forest, and then recasting Rograk, and then he'll pass to Brent. Brent will stop on Instep though to flash in Spectral Sailor, and then he'll move to his turn. He'll then play an island as land for turn, and then fetch with his Myriad Landscape for 2 more islands. The turn is then passed to Ian, who will immediately tap for 3 and morph a creature face down. His enchantment will trigger, allowing him to search for a basic to his hand. He declares he's going to find an island to his hand and play it as land for turn, and he passes to Jason while searching. Jason shocks in Hallowed Fountain, and then he'll tap for 4 and cast Darksteel Reactor, and then he'll pass to Ethan. Ethan starts off by enchanting Rograk with Snake Umbra. He'll then move to combat and bonk Jason for 1 commander and draw a card. Unfortunately though, he does miss a land drop, so he'll pass to Brent. Brent will start off by moving to combat and swinging for 1 in the air at Ethan with Spectral Sailor. Ethan can't block, so before damage, Brent will ninjutsu in Throat Slitter. And so when it connects, he'll blow up Rograk, but it'll actually just blow up the Snake Umbra thanks to Totem Armor. The turn is then passed to Ian, and he'll do essentially what he did last turn. Morph a creature face down for 3, find a Forest to his hand, play it as land for turn, and then pass to Jason. Reactor gets a counter, and then Jason casts Dockside Extortionist, only getting 1 treasure token. He'll then immediately use the treasure and tap for an additional 2 to cast Prosperous Partnership. This will create him 2 1/1s when it ETBs. The turn is then passed to Ethan, and he'll play a basic forest as land for turn, then cast Visions of Dominance on Rograk, and he'll get 2 counters off of this. The turn is then passed to Brent, and he'll start off with a swamp, then he'll tap for 4 and cast Biden of Thassa, and then he'll just pass. Ian will start off by tapping for 4, and he'll cast Dawn's Reflection on his forest. He'll then tap the forest for 3, and morph another creature. This triggers his mysteries again, which will let him find a forest to his hand, and he'll play it as land for turn, and then he'll pass to Jason. Jason will stop on end step to tap 3 creatures and make a treasure. Then he'll move to his turn, and his reactor gets another counter. He'll then play Manor Gate as land for turn, and he names black again. After this, he'll tap 3 creatures to make another treasure, and then using his treasures and his untapped lands, he'll cast Ramos, and then the turn is passed to Ethan, who unfortunately misses another land drop, and he'll just pass the turn to Brent. And Brent plays another island, and then he'll also just pass the turn. Ian will start his turn off by enchanting his other forest with New Horizons, and when it ETBs, he'll put a +1/+1 counter on one of his morphs. After this, he'll tap for 3 and cast his commander, Estrid, and he'll immediately upticker to untap his 2 enchanted lands. After this, he casts a Lifecrafter's Bestiary, and then he'll pass the turn to Jason, whose reactor will get another counter on upkeep, and then he'll tap for 3 and cast Biovisionary. This triggers Ramos, putting 2 +1/+1 counters on him. After this, Jason will move to combat and swing in the air at Estrid for 6, and Ian has no responses, so Estrid will die. Jason will then pass the turn to Ethan, who finds a 5th forest, and he'll play it as land for turn, and then he just passes to Brent, who will flash in his Spectral Sailor on end step, and then also activate its ability for 4 mana to draw a card. He'll then move to his turn and play an island as land for turn, and then he'll use it to cast Soul Ring. He'll then cast Alora, Merry Thief, and then her background, Agent of the Shadow Thieves. He'll then move to combat and swing his Throat Slitter at Ian. His commander triggers, and he'll give it unblockable, and so when it connects, then he'll blow up the morph with a +1/+1 counter on it. And for those of you wondering, the blown up card is a Patron of the Wilds. Also, Brent gets to draw his card off his Bident. The turn is then passed to Ian, and he'll start off by bottoming a card from his Bestiary Scry. He'll then float 4 mana, 1 blue and 3 green, and he'll morph a card floating a green, and then he'll pay that green to his Bestiary whenever he casts it to draw a card, and then upon ETB, he'll find an island to his hand. After this, he'll play the island, and then do essentially the exact same thing. Morph a creature, pay for Bestiary, and then find a plains to his hand. The turn is then passed to Jason, and he'll stop on instep to tap 3 creatures to make a treasure token. Then, still on instep, Jason will cast Cyclonic Rift, not overloaded, on Lifecrafter's Bestiary, triggering Ramos for 1 counter. Moving to his turn, Jason will put another counter on his reactor. Then, he'll cast Fractured Identity on Biden of Thassa. This will exile it, then all other players get to make a token copy of it. And then Ramos will get 2 more counters. Jason will then remove 5 counters from Ramos to make 10 mana, 2 of each color, and then he'll cast and kick Rite of Replication, targeting Biovisionary. Ethan is first in priority, and he will respond. He will cast and also kick Inscription of Abundance. So, Rograk will get 2 counters, Ethan will gain 4 life, and then Rograk will fight Biovisionary, stopping Jason from winning the game this turn. So the Biovisionary dies, the Rite of Replication fizzles, and Jason remembers that Ramos gets a counter. And for his transgressions, Ethan must now take 5 commander damage in the air. The turn is then passed to Ethan, who will start off by Utopia Sprawling one of his forest, naming green. After this, he'll cast a Sword of Truth and Justice, and he'll equip it to his Rograk. He'll then move to combat and swing for 6 Commander of Brent, who can't block it, so he will take it. Ethan has 2 damage triggers, Biden of Thassa, so he draws a card, and then he'll put a +1/+1 counter on Rograk and proliferate it.
I want to watch the world burn.
It's terrible.
And I'm just gonna put one on the. If I lose the Dark Steel Reactor because I proliferated it, I'm okay with that. I'm gonna put a counter on there.
Okay.
So Ethan will also proliferate the Darksteel Reactor in the name of fuck you, it's funny. And hey, thanks to the Biden of Thassa, Ethan finds a forest, and he'll play it as land for turn, and then he'll pass to Brent. And he'll stop on instep to draw a card off his Spectral Sailor, and then he'll move to his turn. And he'll play another island as land for turn. He'll then cast Moonblade Shinobi, then he'll move to combat and swing Spectral Sailor at Jason. It'll become unblockable thanks to his commander, but that doesn't really matter here. And then, as you guessed, before damage, Brent will ninjutsu in his Throat Slitter, and when it connects with Jason, he'll blow up Ramos. The turn is then passed to Ian, and he will immediately move to combat and swing all 4 of his morphs at Ethan, and Ethan will take the 8 damage, and Ian gets to draw 4 cards. Post-combat, he'll cast a Dream Jizzle, and then he'll morph another creature, and this will let him tutor another basic to his hand. He'll then pay 7 mana and flip up that morph card. It's a Brine Elemental, and so when it turns face up, all of his opponents will skip their next untap steps. The turn is then passed to Jason. His reactor gets another counter, and then he'll move to combat and swing for 3 at Ethan, who can't block, so he'll take it, and then Jason gets to draw 3 cards. Post-combat, Jason will play an island, and then using it and a treasure, he'll cast a Fellwar Stone. And then he'll pass to Ethan, and with no untap, Ethan will just draw a card and pass to Brent, who will flash in Spectral Sailor on end step. Then on his turn, he'll just move to combat and swing Alora at Ian. She'll become unblockable, and then gains a +1/+1 counter, Death Touch, and Indestructible, and then will bounce on end step. After combat, Brent will pass the turn, but Jason stops on end step to Swords to Plowshares the Brine Elemental to ensure there's no more shenanigans with that. And then we'll move to Ian's turn, and he'll start off with a Plains as land for turn. He'll then move to combat and swing his 4 2/2s at Jason, who can't block it, and then Ian will draw 4 cards. Post-combat, he'll cast Soul Ring, then he'll morph a creature. He declines the basic search trigger, and then he'll cast Lifecrafter's Bestiary, and then he'll cast Primordial Mist. Then he'll move to his end step and manifest the top card of his library. The turn is then passed to Jason, and his reactor gets another charge counter. He'll then play a Plains as land for turn, and then he casts Inexorable Tide. That seems pretty good with his Darksteel reactor. He'll then cast a Farseek, triggering the Tide, so he'll proliferate, putting another counter on his reactor, and then Ethan says he won't hit him next turn if he puts a counter on Rograk. And Jason takes that deal. The Farseek will then resolve, and he finds Zeator's Proving Ground. The turn is then passed to Ethan, and he'll start off by casting a 3 Visits, finding another force to the battlefield untapped. He'll then enchant Rograk with Keen Sense, and then he'll move to combat and swing Rograk at Brent. Now, Brent already has 6 commander damage from Rograk, and he's not a fan of getting any more, so he'll tap for 4 and cast Aetherize to bounce Rograk back to Ethan's hand. Post-combat, Ethan will drop Rograk, and then re-equip the sword to him, and then he'll pass the turn to Brent. And Brent starts off with Arcane Signet. He'll then recast Alora, and then he'll move to combat and swing his Throat Slitter at Ian, giving it unblockable, and it'll bounce on end step. Connects, he'll destroy the untapped Morph, which is an unblinking blib. Brent will then pass the turn, and on end step, Ian will cycle Desert of the Indomitable. On his turn, he'll scry 1 to the top with Bestiary, then play Command Tower, then he'll move to combat and full swing all of his creatures at Jason. Jason wants to try to kill at least one of his morphed creatures, so he puts Dockside and one of his 1/1s under a morph, and he puts it under number 3, and then he'll tap 3 of his creatures to make a treasure token. Ian takes a peek at what Jason's gonna kill, and he doesn't seem to be a huge fan. So, still before damage, Ian will pay 5 mana to his manifested card and turn it face up to reveal Whisperwood Elemental. Trail of Mystery triggers, buffing it up to a 6/6. Then, to prevent his blocked morph from dying, he'll pay 2 to flip up Vesuvan Shapeshifter. And he'll have it copy Whisperwood Elemental, so it will survive. And it'll also get +2/+2 till end of turn. So, damage will then go through, Jason takes 12, and Ian will draw 4 cards. After this, Ian passes the turn, and he has to discard 2 lands on cleanup. And he also manifests 3 cards. Now on Jason's turn, his reactor gets its 9th counter. He'll then move to combat and ask Ethan if he can swing at him for 1, so he can draw a card and potentially find a board wipe to deal with Ian's board. And Ethan will let the 1 damage through. Post-combat, Jason will play a Command Tower. Then he'll tap for 4 and cast 9 Fingers Keen. Tide trigger, and he'll proliferate his reactor. Jason will then pass the turn, but Ethan will stop on end step to cast Beast Within on the original Whisperwood Elemental. Ian will respond by paying 6 mana and flipping up Keru Spell Snatcher, attempting to counter and steal the spell. Jason, however, will respond to its ability by tapping for 6 and casting Sublime Epiphany. He'll counter the ability, bounce the copy of the elemental to Ian's hand, create a token copy of his 1/1 token, and then draw a card. He'll also get to proliferate his reactor. Everything will then resolve, and we move to Ethan's turn. And he'll start off with a Witch's Clinic as land for turn. He'll then tap for 5 and cast Hunter's Prowess on Rograk. After this, he'll move to combat and swing for 5 Commander at Brent, and before damage, he'll give Rograk lifelink with Witch's Clinic. When damage goes through, he has 3 triggers. 1 to put a +1 counter on Rograk and to proliferate it, then he'll draw 5 from Hunter's Prowess, and then an additional 1 from Bident. Ethan will then pass the turn to Brent, but he'll stay on end step to activate Spectral Sailor twice and draw 2 cards. And now on his turn, he'll start off with a basic island. Then he'll pay 4 to Spectral Sailor again to draw another card. Then he'll do it again. And then he'll do it one last time. After this, he'll move to combat, and he'll swing Moonblade Shinobi at Ethan, and his commander, Alora, at Ian. Alora will be the target of her own trigger, and then she'll also get a trigger off her background. There are no blocks, so damage will go through, and Brent gets to make a 1/1 flyer. He'll then just pass the turn to Ian. Ian will morph another creature and decline the search trigger. Then he'll cast Mastery of the Unseen. After this, he'll move to combat and turn everything sideways at Brent. Brent declares no blocks, and Ian has some flipping to do before damage. Well, just one thing specifically, and that's Master of the Pearls. When it's turned face up, all of his creatures will get +2/+2 till end of turn, and then he'll also gain 9 life. This is a total of 36 damage going at Brent, and since he already declared no blockers, this is lethal. Sorry Brent, you are dead. Ian will also get to draw 8 cards off Biden of Thassa. Post-combat, Ian will tap for 5 and cast Ixodron, and when it enters the battlefield, it'll turn all non-token creatures face down. He'll then pass the turn, discard 4 cards, manifest the top card of his library, and then pass the turn to Jason, whose reactor gets another counter. Jason will then immediately move to combat and swing for 4 damage at Ethan with 3 creatures, and they'll connect and Jason draws 3 cards. After this, he'll cast Path to Exile, targeting the Morph, not the Manifest, because he knows that's a creature. Inexorable Tide will proliferate Reactor and Rograk. Ian will respond by paying the Morph cost to the targeted card, and it's the Vesuvian Shapeshifter. What he targets doesn't matter, he's just doing it to gain 10 life. After this, Jason will cast Scoot Swarm, proliferating his Reactor and Rograk again. He'll then cast Croaking Counterpart, targeting his Scoot Swarm to make a Croak Swarm, and he'll proliferate the same targets again. He'll then play Orzhov Guildgate as land for turn, and his 2 Scoot Swarms will trigger. Then Jason will cast Azor's Elocutors, and he'll proliferate the same targets again. The turn is then passed to Ethan, and he'll start off with a basic forest. Then he'll tap for 6 and cast Raised by Giants. He'll then activate Witch's Clinic to give his commander lifelink, and then he moves to combat and swings at Ian, who will chump block with his Manifest, and Ethan gains 19 life. The turn is then passed to Ian, and he'll immediately move to combat and swing all of his face down cards and his 3/3 Beast at Jason, and then Ixodron at Ethan. Jason asks Ian which cards are manifests and which are morphs, and he separates them. Then Jason puts his original Scoot Swarm under the 3/3, and then his 4 other creatures under the 4 morphs. Ian will Megamorph a Den Protector, which is what the Elocutors are blocking. So it'll get a 1/1 counter, he'll return Whisperwood Elemental to his hand, and then Deathmist Raptor that he discarded at the end of last turn will return to the battlefield, face up. Oh yeah, and he gains another 10 life. He'll also flip up his Master of Pearls again to give all his creatures +2/+2, and gain another 10 life. So now everything on Jason's side of the board will die, and he takes 12 damage, and then since Ian turned 2 cards face up, Ethan only takes 7. Ian will then get to draw 4 cards. Ian will then play a forest, and then cast Wilderness Reclamation, then play another morph face down, then 2 more morphs face down, and then he'll move to his end step, untap all of his lands, and manifest the top card of his library. The turn is then passed to Jason, and he goes up to 17 counters on his reactor, only 3 spells away from winning the game. He'll cast a 3 visits, 18 counters. Then he'll move to combat and swing with 3 creatures at Ethan, and Ethan can't block, so Jason gets to draw 3 more cards. He'll then cast Sword of Truth and Justice, 19 counters. Then, with his last 7 untapped mana, he casts the last spell in his hand, Phage the Untouchable. Proliferate trigger brings Jason up to 20 counters on Darksteel Reactor.
I would like to apologize to Prince Ian for my meme earlier. I did not think this would happen.
Okay. Oh, this is the exact one we needed, huh? Yeah.
Yep.
You called it and everything.
That is 20 counters on Darksteel Reactor.
And you didn't have any more? God damn it.
Well, everybody, there it was. That was your win. Darksteel Reactor, Ramos win cons. What the heck? I think Ethan learned a valuable lesson. Don't proliferate Darksteel Reactors. But for real though, that was a hilarious victory. Let us know what you guys thought. For real though, this video is almost 20 minutes long, and I am tired of editing it. So, you know what? You guys go check out all the links in the description. I'm hopping off. I hope you all have a smooth day.